Hello and welcome to another Exploring Creativity session where we've looked at the work of Maria, um, Anne-Marie Anne-Marie Delaunay-Danizio, who is a contemporary abstract expressionist artist, the neo-abstract expressionist, and uses a variety of materials, inks, graphite, pastel, pen, acrylic paint to produce these quite amazing abstract expressionist artworks. So I'm going to show you how to work expressionistically and in using abstraction. So I hope you enjoy today. Okay, so I have a big piece of this is hot pressed watercolor paper that I'm going to use. So it's quite thick. I think it's 350 GSM. It's actually on a block, so I don't need to stretch it to stop it from wrinkling. But if you have just regular paper, you might want to tape it around the edge using masking tape onto a board or onto your kitchen table or whichever table you've got to stop it from wrinkling when you add the water and ink and all the paint and everything that you're going to do. I'm going to start off with, I haven't got ink in colours. I'm actually going to use food colouring, but this is black food colouring. So, but you can use black ink or whatever you want. And I'm just going to, my first starting point with this abstract expressionist artwork is just to flat randomly with some, it's actually food colouring, but you can use ink if you want. And then I'm going to take a brush. I've got a big jar of water and a big floppy brush, and I'm going to just add some water to that. And I'm just doing this. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, really, not in an intellectual manner. I'm just splashing water in into the food colouring. So splashing it around, it's making quite interesting effects already on the paper. So that is my starting point. And then I'm going to take a different kind of brush, a smaller one, and this is quite a bristly one. So it's not as soft. And I'm just going to work randomly into the stuff that I've put down, the water and doing these swirly shapes. So that's my first layer. And it does quite interesting thing. And then, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose randomly a colour of oil pastel, and I'm going to do some areas just scribbling. This one is yellow, but it's got some other colour on it because I've been doing layering with it. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean. And then just block in some areas randomly using this yellow. And I'm pressing very hard, so I'm getting quite an intense effect. If you want a less intense effect, you press more lightly. Doesn't show up terribly well on the screen, but you can see some areas that are in shadow. You can see it. So there we are. That's that colour. And then I'm going to add some pink circles in a different oil pastel colour, but it's still oil pastel. And I'm going to let it run into like mixing it in, like layering it over the top of the oil pastel that I put down the yellow. And bearing in mind that, you know, everything I'm doing now may change. Also, some areas where I put the food colouring down have already started to dry, so I can go over them if I want to with the oil pastel and see kind of that, whether it shows through, which it does subtly. You can see the food colouring showing through the oil pastel, so it's creating quite nice effects. Okay. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I've got this, I'm using quite a lot of edible stuff today, so I've got this cake decor gold icing spray stuff. Just found it in my box. And I'm going to just puff it into the food colouring. See what happens. This creates a nice effect. I don't know what that's going to look like when it's dry. And I might blot it out soon because it might not dry that fast. So now I've got this nice layer of sort of goldiness. And what I'm going to do next is get a smaller brush. So I've got this just ordinary brush. And I've got some watercolours on my palette from a while ago. I'm just going to work into them, bring them back up into a liquid, or bring them up into a liquid form. And now I want it to be, I guess, fairly thick at this point. So I'm not adding too much water. I just want to see what happens when I place that. Kind of see if it blurs into the food colouring, but also I know that I'll get what's called wax resist. So where I paint across the oil pastel will reject the watercolour. You get quite a nice kind of bright effect. So I'm going to pause while I do this. I'm basically just going to put some blue down all over the place and see what happens. So I've put this blue down in some areas. I haven't done it across the whole thing. I've just put around where I put the oil pastel down. And my next plan is to do some swirly shapes using this. This is water soluble graphite, the graphite stick. It's water soluble. So what will happen to this is that it will sort of blur on the wet areas, but it won't blur on the dry areas. And I'm just going to go very abstract expressionist and just do some kind of very big swirly lines working right across all the whole thing, just to see what happens. And remembering that this is like a layer, so this will likely change across, well, it's going to change across the next hour. So I'm pressing quite hard and I'm allowing it to go everywhere. And you'll notice that it layers over the oil pastel. So the oil pastel will not resist the water soluble graphite. So you might want to take advantage of that and do some interesting marks across. And you can see how it goes really quite nice and blurry in areas that are still wet. But where it's dry, it's much less blurry. So I'm just going to do some shapes in some of the dry areas, not much left of dry area. And then once I've done this, what I'm minded to do is get a nice red sort of watercolor color, I think. And I'm going to kind of fill in some of these little shapes that I'm doing with my water-soluble graphite. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to do some areas in non-water-soluble graphite. So I've got my graphite pens filled over here. Use a 4B. And I'm going to just draw some shapes with my, so this is non-water soluble graphite. And this, when I add the paint into it, the paint will not blur into it. So you'll get a nice edge, kind of sharp edge of graphite. And you'll be able to see the difference when we get to that point of adding the paint, of what happens with the water soluble and non-water soluble graphite. And I'm going to draw in some areas with this non-water soluble graphite, some areas that are dampish and some areas that are quite wet, just so you can see. So you can draw into wet with it and it creates quite a sharp line. It won't blur like the water-soluble graphite will. And it creates a kind of different, quite a sort of different linear effect. It kind of dents the paper. If the paper is damp, you get this kind of dent happening. So it's starting to come together. It's sort of starting to look like, I don't know, some kind of weird sort of pattern. And I want to deliberately leave some areas less. I mean, I don't want it to be completely chaotic and messy everywhere. I'm going to leave some areas, open, kind of with just a few layers. And so back to my watercolor. I've got all this watercolor from before, and I have this lovely carmine color. I'm actually going to add some more, so I just need to find my tubes of watercolor because I want it to be quite intense. So I've put down some quinacridone magenta. It's this one here, this one, and some alizarin crimson. And I'm going to sort of use a combination of those. I'm just mixing in some water. There's a bit of gold on there from before that I don't mind that getting in there. And then, so just showing you, I pop it in. I can't remember now which ones are the water soluble and which ones are not. So it's quite random. And I'm doing very light touch, quite thick paint. Light touch. I might add a bit more water to it. So I'm just like bringing it up to the edge so that I'm not overlapping. I want to allow the graphite to show. So you see, this is the water-soluble graphite, and as I pull the brush along, you can see how it starts to blur, all blurring in, whereas that one was not water-soluble graphite, and it stayed, the edge stayed sharp, stayed quite, colours a bit more, less, not contaminated by the graphite. And then if I go across here, I know it's all going to kind of bleed out. This is still very wet. So it's all going to sort of, going to be chaos, frankly. So it's all, yeah, it's not going to create like a clear sort of red colour kind of mingling with everything that's there. That's all still wet. The line of the graphite is creating a little bit of a barrier, but it's kind of going over it. You can, you know, if I pressed harder here and pushed that paint up, it would start to do that. I quite like the you know, juxtaposition of an area where it's not doing it so much. It's bleeding out much more slowly, whereas here it's big blobs on across. So I'm kind of playing around with all that. So I think I'm going to pause it while I continue. And basically, everywhere I put the graphite down, I'm just going to fill in with a deep red colour. Okay, so I've done those areas in red. I've also done this thing where I've done some splats as well. The way you do that is you load your brush up with the red, or whatever colour you've got of watercolour, and then you hold it very loosely at the end, and then make sure you keep your face far away, as far away as you can from the tip of the brush, because what you're going to do is bash it close into the paper, and it will flick down onto the paper, but it will also flick upwards as well. So if you have your face near, you're going to end up with paint all over your face. So just one or two, well, in the corners, maybe a little here and there as well across the thing. I don't want to do too much of that, but just like to create some speckledy texture. And the next thing I'm going to do is, so what I've done before, just to recap, it is, excuse me, I did the water-soluble graphite, and then the not water-soluble, the regular ordinary graphite. And now I'm going to do the same, but I'm going to be doing it with coloured pencil. I'm going to start off, just quickly sharpen my pencil. Oh, doesn't want to work. I will use one that's already sharpened. So I'm going to draw some shapes with these pencils, which are not water soluble. Okay. And then I'm going to draw some shapes with some pencils that are watercolor pencils that are water soluble. And then I'm going to do the same where I go around filling them in with a color. Okay, so I've done a few of these little green circles in just regular pencil, green pencil. And now I'm going to do the same with some green watercolor pencil. I'm going to just add some circles here and there. Oops. With this green watercolor pencil, and some in areas that are dry, some in areas that are not entirely dry. Kind of looking at what happens to the colours and the textures. I'm pressing very hard. You can see I keep breaking my pencil. I'm pressing so hard. So I'm just going to continue doing that. The harder you press, the more pigment will come off the pencil, and that will affect the colour. Okay, so I've done some of these other circles in the watercolour, water-soluble pencil. And I've also done some little scribbly areas, just 3. I just felt like doing that. And this is all about gestural work and going with your instinct. So I am now going to add the watercolour to those areas. I'm going to get a smaller brush, and I'm going to use pan watercolour just because I want to do it in yellow. So I'll come back when I've found my small brush and changed up my water, because my water is very purple now, and I want fresh, clean colours. So I'll be back in 1 second. So I've got my little brush, and I've got some nice bright yellow in this pan watercolours, and I'm just working it up, like working up a lather with soap, something. Working it up by adding lots of water to it, and then I'm just going to go around and add that yellow in, wanting to keep the colours fairly bright. So I'm just adding the yellow into wherever I've got the green circles, and noticing the difference between the water-soluble green and the non-water-soluble green. So if I sort of work quite vigorously around the edge of the one that's not water-soluble, absolutely nothing happens. Doesn't affect the yellow at all. But if I do the same on the edges of the one that is water-soluble, it starts to dissolve a bit, and it's making the yellow more limey, greeny colour. So hopefully you can see the difference there between this one, which is water-soluble, and it's kind of making the yellow more greenish, and that one where it still is not doing anything to it. So I'm going to pause while I go around filling in all my little circles and playing around with adding some around the edges of the scribbles. Okay, so I've done all these circles in yellow, and I added some splats of yellow too around some of the areas where I added the splats of red. And then I also splatted water in up here to make it meld a bit more and, make it more blurry and a bit more interesting. And you can see here where there was the water-soluble graphite going across the circle. And when I've added the yellow paint into that, it's blurred in that area, not elsewhere. So it's all very interesting, all this lovely stuff that's happening on here, all very chaotic. My next process is going to be starting to add some large areas of acrylic paint. So this is going to be a bit of a game changer. Some of my areas are still really, really wet. So what I might do is I'm going to suck up some of that paint. Well, it's mainly food colouring, using just an ordinary tissue that you would use to blow your nose. I'm going to see what happens when I sort of dab it onto a very wet area, and you can see it just lifts it off. So I'm going to leave some of these areas wet, but other areas I'm going to lift off because I want more room to work with with the acrylic paint without it making just a big mess, if you like. So I'm just going to go around with a tissue or two, because once your tissue gets saturated, then you're going to need to switch to another one. And just in some areas, suck up some of the liquid. And it's quite nice because then also it might reveal something underneath. So here you can see the water-soluble graphite that got obscured by the liquid. And what I might also do is dab on top of, say, for example, this oil pastel with what I've got on here is like lots of the gold powder that I put on. You know, you might want to do that, play around with adding. So I'm just going to suck up some more of it. I want to leave, some areas I'm going to leave because I'm interested to see what happens when those bits dry. But like I say, I want some more dry areas for when I'm going to add the acrylic paint across the top. So okay, just going to do one more bit up here and then leave. So I'm leaving some areas, more around the edge really of this. Get some lovely textures. When you suck it up, it reveals these nice textures going on underneath. So I'm going to leave those other ones to dry. See what happens when they dry. And I have got my palette here. It's got a bit of watercolor on, but it doesn't matter. And I'm going to put out some acrylic paint. What I want is a nice kind of rich pale blue, I think. So I've got some white. Just going to squeeze a big lot of white. I'm just going to clean this section off. And then I'm going to squidge some white. Not much left. I have got some more. Okay, so I've got, as you can see, quite a big volume of white. And I've got what's called phthalo turquoise. I'm just going to open the tube because it's a bit stuck together. So this is phthalo turquoise. It's quite an intense blue. It's quite dark on the camera, but it's a turquoisey colour. I mean, it's a dark turquoise. And then I'm going to get my brush and I'm going to get a damp brush. I'm going to use this bristly one. They're quite good for mixing. And I'm just going to mix those together until I have quite a smooth colour. So we talked about the palette. So the artist we looked at, Anne-Marie Delaunay-Danizio, has a very, very vibrant, bright colour palette, and they're quite ice creamy colours, so they might be a little bit, some people might not like that choice of colour. But it's a definite kind of signature colour use, really. So I've got this nice gloopy pale blue now. It's quite pale now. and it's all mixed in quite a thick consistency. You can see it's sort of, you know, the consistency of a bit thicker than whipped cream, clotted cream maybe, but thicker. Anyway, butter icing, perhaps. Anyway, it's a lot of food analogies. So now my plan is to scoop up a massive load of it on my brush like that, and to just scoop it on, again, working gesturally, working intuitively, and just going to create these nice shapes. And I'm going to vary the pressure of my brush. So where I press harder, you might get thicker globs. Where I press lighter, you might get a bit of what's underneath showing through. But also, if I just place the paint on, it won't mix in. If I press really hard, well, you get more texture happening with the kind of brush strokes. Also, because I'm using a bristly brush, that's a very textured brush. So you can see in some areas it's creating this nice effect where those colours are mingling into it. Actually really quite fun, this bit. And I haven't got like a massive amount of paint, so I'm going to do one more of these shapes. I can do it up here. Okay, so that's my one colour. So now you can see it's kind of transformed the whole thing. It started to really kind of change. So I'm going to mix another colour, and I'm going to put some more shapes down. I think I'm going to go for a very bright green. So I've actually already got some of this blue left, and I'm going to add, got this fluorescent yellow. Oh, it's very bright. We're going for brightness today. So I'm going to mix that in with the blue and create this very vibrant, sort of very extraordinary. Can't probably really just go get it on the camera, like maybe see it a little bit there, but it's fluorescent green, very vibrant color. And so I want to mix that until it's nice and thoroughly mixed. And then actually I think I'm going to add a little bit more yellow because it's gone a little bit darker. Yeah. Oh, like, this colour. I wish you could see it properly on there. It's like, you can't see it properly, but it's a very special colour. Anyway, right. So I'm going to just do, and this is where you have to be quite brave and be like, oh, I'm just going to, paint over everything. And then if you want, more thicker paint, less background showing through, just paste it on, just sort of place it there, get these big areas of impasto. Do another one over here. You might, this bit I've hardly touched the paper, so you've got what's underneath is showing through quite nicely. I think I'm going to do another one here. Ooh, look at that. So that's where it's going right through an area that's still very puddly and wet. And then it's just created this very nice, well, in my opinion, very nice effect. So I'm going to just do one more shape. Now, the choice of what I want to keep revealed. I'm going to actually do, because I'm really liking what happened over there. They say working in abstract expressionism, you're not making, you're not thinking, you're not making decisions, but you kind of can't help it, because I want to choose which bits I want to stay revealed and which bits to, I love what's happened here. And I've got another puddle over here. So I'm going to, if I can oh, look at that. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm replicating that. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to do some baby pink, bubblegum pink. So I'm just going to mix the bubblegum pink with some very pale pink and do some sort of big circles of pale pink across it. And that might be, I might then draw on top of it as well, but let's just see how we get on next. Okay, so I have my big splodge of white and deep magenta, and I'm going to mix them together till I get a nice pink. Well, that's subjective, a pink. And so that's quite, to my eyes, fairly pleasant. And so I'll whack that on in a minute. I mean, this is the stage at which you think, oh, it's like, am I ruining it? I'm painting over all this lovely layering. You just have to go with flow. And making decisions about which parts you want to retain and which parts you want to obliterate. There's a particular part that you love, just leave it showing. So I want to do one more. I don't know where to put it. I think perhaps here. And it runs. Oh, look at that. Oh, running into the. So nice. And I'm just going to do look at this. Right. So I could now start going crazy, like a little bit actually, blurring it, smearing around a little bit. I'm losing some of the stuff, but I like in the layering effect. I'm working lightly. You can sort of get the hint of what's underneath. But you're also getting these sort of weird stripes. Okay, I don't want to do too much, but yeah, very difficult to stop. I'm working very, very lightly, no pressure on my brush, a little bit of paint just on my brush and just. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. So it's sort of moved through lots of different, different stages, I should say. And, if you wanted to take it even further, you could let it dry and then add some soft pastel. Like it might be quite nice to sort of go over some of these areas in soft pastel. So, yeah, it's still too wet really to add the soft pastel, although you could add it to certain areas. Would benefit from it. I think we'll end there. I hope you enjoyed that and see you next time.